Welcome to the 8th edition of Leith Lives, brought to you by the Living Memory Association. Our guest on this edition is author and tour guide Tim Bell, who has lived in Leith for 40 years. Here, Tim recalls the magnificent adventures that created a path to the port and his life since arriving. Originally recorded for Thelma FM, music has been edited for podcast purposes. I'm honoured to have with me today Tim Bell, the author of Choose Life, Choose Leith. Tim, welcome to the studio.
Good morning.
You are a Leith resident, Tim?
I've been a Leith resident for nearly 40 years now.
We're going to go right back in Tim's life to look at the point where he became a Leither, the point where he became an author. We're going to go right back to the start of your life, Tim. So can you, in fact, let's talk about your creators, first of all. Can you tell us a little bit about your parents?
Well, yes, certainly. My father was a minister. He was preaching pacifism from the pulpit in North Shields, Tyneside, during the war. And at the end of the war, he persuaded somebody with money to buy a country estate just off the A68, if you know the road through Jedburgh, over Carter Bar, the first bit of country down there onto England. Smashing place to grow up. It was an old big house, and he ran it as a holiday hotel in the summer, and in the winter months he had various conferences, mainly lefty, churchy, educational, community groups, and it was a great place to grow. In the middle of the country, but the world came to me.
It's obviously a happy childhood,
well,
Tim.
It was.
What are the memories? If you try to walk around that house in your memory just now, what do you see?
Oh, I see 3 estate cottages knocked together. So I see 7 outside doors, 3 staircases, 3 toilets, and you could run around and play hide and seek.
Sounds very grand, Tim.
Well,
very grand.
It was comfortable and it was great. I loved it.
Yeah, fantastic. So you were brought up there. What was the town like and the surroundings?
Oh, it was rural. We were a mile out of the village, between Otterburn village and the army camp. Quite a lot of people know the army camp. Other people know Otterburn just by name because they pass through it. Very few people stop. And, then it was quite remote. There was a bus to Newcastle every day. In fact, there were 2. The Scotch bus used to come down. But it was a whole day's journey, and now it's commuter land.
And what kind of time did you spend with your mum and dad? Your dad sounds like a very busy man. Was he around? Was he a hands-on dad? Was it just weekends?
No, he was very creative. He made lots of opportunities for lots of different people. But he wasn't the easiest man to be the son of. And my mother was a doctor, and she, I'm as middle class as hell. There's no getting away from it, and please, I'm comfortable with that. My mother was a doctor. She couldn't practice as a GP. Women in those days, they did give up their careers for their families.
Yeah. So was she a stay-at-home mum? Was she cooking the meals?
Well, she wasn't she got the perfect job for her. She was a paediatrician, actually, and she did the preschool screening for the health department of the county council. So she went around village clinics all over Northumberland for many a year. And, she saw kids. And then she was pleased to see the children of parents who she'd seen as children. And latterly, when she was in a care home in the village, she was looked after by people who she'd seen as children.
Oh, that's wonderful.
40 or 50 years ago. Wonderful.
And was your mum a good cook, Tim? Did she? Do you remember any of the meals from back in those days?
Yes, she was a good cook.
And was it because I was brought up by my grandparents, and it was very traditional meat and 2 veg, kind of mince and tatties, sausages and mash, those kind of things.
I remember the first time I had pineapple, which was a real treat. It was the usual standard fare from the 1950s.
Yeah. And was that out of a tin, Tim, or was that an actual real pineapple?
No, that was out of a tin, and that was a real treat.
And earliest friendships, Tim, do you remember any pals from those days who would hang about in that area?
Yes, there was a policeman's son. I don't know what happened to him. He taught us, he came to tea, and he had this, my mother was shocked. He said, you could put cheese on your jam piece. So cheese and jam, good combination. My mother said that was a shocking thing to do, but we really took to it. So that was Larry Hindmarsh, that was.
Oh, that's funny, because you're the first person who I've ever met who is also like cheese and jam, because I'm a cheese and jam. Do you still have cheese and jam?
Oh, yes, on occasions.
Yeah.
For a bit of a treat. I always think of Larry.
I still have it, because my granddad used to say that cheese and jam was what the cyclists had. At the Tour de France. Seemed like it was quite a good combination for energy. But he heard that at some point, so I used to have cheese and jam before I played football for energy.
I hope it worked for you.
Well,
you were
I was pretty good. I still Every time I think of football, I can't help but think of... I read about a sports science thing at one point saying that Jaffa cakes were good to have at half-time. And I was the player manager of my team at that point, and I gave them Jaffa cakes at half-time, and we're 3-0 up, and we contrived to lose the game 4-3.
It's the Jaffa cakes.
Well, I think you were supposed to just have half or one Jaffa cake, and my players had 3 or 4 each.
Well,
that's what went wrong.
That was the undoing of it.
Oh, cheese and finally I've got cheese and jam brother, Tim.
Right.
Excellent. Excellent. And what outdoor games did you play as a child, Tim?
Oh, well, we just ran about the woods, in the fields, and played football. And I made the great mistake of passing my 11 plus, you see. And it was such a rural area that the choice, the local grammar school was weekly boarding in a hostel. And my father went to a boarding school when he was a boy, and so I was packed off to a Quaker school in York, to a boarding school there. So it was all cricket and hockey and
Right, well, I'd like to find out about those boarding school days, Tim, to see if they were happy days. First, though, we're going to play Limelight, a little bit of Jackie Gleason on Thelma FM, then we will get back to the life story of Mr. Tim Bell. Jackie Gleason and his orchestra on Thelma FM. We are here on Life Stories today with Tim Bell, the author of Choose Life, Choose Leith, a fantastic book about Trainspotting on location and the things that happened around the location. We'll speak about that later, though, because we're not yet there in Tim's life story. So we'll naturally get to the bit where we give your fantastic book a little bit of coverage. But we're at the point in your life, Tim, where you've said that it was a kind of unfortunate thing almost getting your 11 plus because it sent you off to a school where... Did you lose pals at that point?
Well, I suppose I did, yes. It was a shift of community, to lose the home life and go off to school in another place, down in York it was. I didn't take to it very well, and I was quite rebellious and unhappy for a couple of years. I settled in, and I don't know anybody from my school days. I'd be almost frightened to meet them now. There's one or two. It was boys only. I didn't know what girls were until I was 18 or 19.
And how often would you get home, Tim?
Well, school holidays, Christmas, Easter and summer.
And did you find that when you were home, because you were away at boarding school, did you find that your parents spent more time with you because of your absence? Or was it just the same kind of routine because they were busy?
Well, they were busy, and the same routines, I suppose, were quite reassuring. And that wasn't a problem. What boarding school did for me, actually, was give me the confidence to roam the world when I left. It also had the effect of making me wonder where I belonged.
And so how long did it take you to come to terms with it then? Was it a couple of years or months, or how long?
Well, it's at school itself. I was for the first couple of years I was pretty rebellious, and looking back on it, I was obviously wanting home. But that didn't happen, so I settled in at school, and I was a crap student. But I was good on the sports field.
Yeah. What were your specialities on the academic subjects? Anything at all, Tim? English, perhaps?
English, geography. I was good enough at geography to find my way home.
So you excelled on the cricket pitch? Was that your top sport?
Cricket and hockey, yeah.
What was your biggest ever score in those days? Can you remember?
Oh, I was a bit of a bowler.
Right.
Leg spin. No very big turn. It was just the nagging length.
Any spectacular days that really stick in your mind when you took a lot of wickets?
No, I remember when we beat Ampleforth College. It was it was supposed to be a big game, and it was a home game for us, and it started at 11 o'clock, which was big. And it was all over by tea time with a convincing victory for our boys. And I think I took 3 or 4 wickets in that day.
Excellent. And I suppose that kind of sporting success would have helped you bed in with your new pals, I take it.
Sure.
Yeah, a good bowler becomes a good friend very quickly, I would think. So the boarding school life, was it kind of fairly militaristic?
Oh, not at all. No, it was a Quaker boarding school. No.
Right, okay.
My older brother said they were cruel quietly.
Right. And how much of that educational life then would be based around religion and belief?
It was, yes. I mean, we were marched off to the Quaker meeting house every Sunday, and there was a short silence, which was the assembly, beginning of the assembly every day. Yes, I mean, it was built around religion.
Yeah. And for those listening who've no idea what the Quakers are, Tim, how would you sum them up?
Well, they call themselves the Society of Friends. They don't have a liturgy. They don't have prayers. Their form of worship is to meet in silence with the Bible brought in the middle, and people get up and speak as the Spirit moves them. So it could be 3 or 4 different contributions in the space of an hour. It could be 5 or 6, perhaps it would be a busy day. It could be only 1 or 2, which is do you want to know how boring that is when you're 16?
I can imagine, but it's still an organisation that is quietly successful and influential across the world.
I've got a lot of respect for them. I don't like that form of worship. I've later got into the Church of Scotland, which is where my father was, and I like my liturgy, my hymns, and my prayers, and all that stuff. But the Quakers, what they do in the world, you can't fault them. They do some very good things. The peacekeeping operations and so forth. Yes, because I've got a lot of respect for them.
And so, looking back on those school days again, Tim, did you ever do anything forbidden? Ever get into big trouble? I know you were rebellious at the start, but was there any particular incidents where you were in?
I was pretty good at jumping over the wall, getting poker chips for the other boys. I was the one that, they gave me the money and I had to come back with the six penneth of chips with scraps. The scraps are bits of batter that fall off the fish, you see.
And that's quite a skill in itself, Tim, climbing a wall, holding chips.
Oh, yeah, well, indeed. I was there was good money in it. Yeah. Sometimes I made a penny a shot, for going.
And would that be salt and vinegar on those chips, or just salt?
Salt and vinegar, oh no, salt and vinegar.
And are you a salt and sauce man now, Tim?
No.
It's never changed.
No, I've never gone down the sauce road.
Yeah, my son refused to even try chippy sauce. Have you even tried it, Tim?
Quite right, he's a well brought up boy.
Excellent. So, what year did you leave school, Tim?
64.
And was there any option to stay? Was that the first chance you had to leave school? Was that 6 full years of secondary?
Well, I was just expected to stay on for sixth form, so I wasn't a success. I only stayed on for the cricket,
right,
into my sixth form. But I was 18 in 64, is that right? It'll be right enough. And there was no chance of going on to university, and they worried about what to do with me, poor lad that I was. So they sent me off to a Quaker school in Lebanon, just up the hill from Beirut.
Goodness
and
me.
That, so it was what they would call it, a gap year now. And it was a sort of Quaker arrangement for voluntary service overseas. And I had a very formative year.
Right, well, we're going to hear about that after a little bit of Perry Como on Thelma FM. Probably not a lot of Perry Como in Lebanon, but that's what we're going to hear about next.
Serenade you in the rain.
Perry Como on Thelma FM. I love you, that's why I serenade you in the rain. They don't make romance like that anymore, Tim.
No, they don't.
And we take the quite extraordinary Thelma FM leap from Perry Como to the Lebanon, where Tim, he left school and then went to the Lebanon in the 60s. What was a Quaker?
It was a Quaker
project?
high school. It was they took some village kids and they took some wealthy kids from the Gulf and a bunch of internationals, all sorts. It was a really international school and it was really quite inspiring.
And just based around doing good deeds in the local community, doing good projects. What was the ethos behind it? Because it wasn't university, was it? It wasn't college. It was. And you'd left school.
I'd left school. I was sent there as a volunteer teacher, but I didn't teach anything significant. It was clearly set up for me to learn far more than I was ever going to teach. And why not? I mean, it was a great opportunity for me, a young man.
Yeah.
And so I was based in the school. I was comfortably set up, and I went around the region. And Christmas holidays, I went to East Jerusalem in the West Bank and Amman, Damascus, and back. And then in the summer, the Easter holiday.
And what were you doing in these regions, Tim?
Well, just travelling and having a look. And my introduction to the area was through the Palestinian refugees.
Yeah,
Israel was reasonably new then. This was before the 67 war, of course. And in the Easter break, I went north through Damascus and Aleppo and went into Turkey and got as far as Ankara and Istanbul and back along the south coast. Just wonderful. And then in the summer, and this was very important to me actually, on my way back to home, I had fallen in with the YMCA in Beirut, and the Canadian YMCA was running a work project in Gaza Strip, and I just strung along. So for 3 weeks in the summer of 65, I was on a work camp in Gaza. And there's a photograph of me with two Palestinian boys, my own age, and it hangs on my wall. And they've never left my heart. I've no idea what became of them, but one of the boys said, "I've never been home." And I thought that was a ridiculous thing to say. I knew what home was. It was the rolling hills of Northumberland.
Yeah.
And I said, "Where do you live?" He said, "I live here." "Well, this is home." "No," he said, Oh, I said, this conversation took a week, you understand? Well, where were you born? I was born here. Well, this is home, he said. No. And it turned out that he'd been conceived on his father's farm in 1947 or 8. And before he was born, his family was pushed off the land and they pitched up in Gaza, where they'd remained ever since. So he was born a refugee. I've never been home. And these, very recently, in the last couple of weeks, I'm just back from Israel-Palestine, which was the first time I'd been back in 55 years. Maybe talk about that later.
Yeah.
But my introduction to the region was that, yeah. And then I went on to Egypt and Cyprus, and then I do remember I got the boat into Piraeus, which is the Leith of Athens.
Is that modern Leith or old Leith?
No, well, it's been bought over by the Chinese now. But I think Leith and Piraeus should form a twinning arrangement, and I'm offering to be the first ambassador.
Right. We'll start that process today, Tim. Just to step back in time slightly, Tim, we'll go back to, we'll start off again in a moment from Athens, but just to go back to that point where you left school and then went straight on to this extraordinary adventure. Was this, I take it your parents had put this to you as an idea?
Yes.
Immediately, did you just think that sounds incredible, I'm off? Or was it a kind of... did you not feel that was there any kind of need to kind of go your own way at that point? Or were you just happy to go on this adventure placed in front of you?
That was breaking out. That was getting away from it all. That was seeing the world. You know, a lot of kids my age would finish school on Friday and start work on Monday.
Even university life's very similar to school life, you know. People paint it as an adventure in itself, but it's very regimented and similar to...
Absolutely. No, I mean, VSO was the big opportunity, you know, voluntary service overseas. But that was a different setup. This was a Quaker overseas voluntary service. It was the same thing, just within the Quaker setup. And so there were safety nets and some familiarity. But what an opportunity for an 18-year-old laddie.
And in your head, did you think this is a year of adventure and then I'll be back?
I didn't know what I was going to do.
No. Okay. So from Athens then, where do we go from there?
Well, I just hitchhiked across Europe, and I remember these were the days of hitchhiking. I just stuck my thumb up, and the only money I spent on transport between Piraeus and Calais was a bus fare in Hamburg, I think.
That's brilliant. Just couldn't do that these days unless you were blogging about it and making a TV show out of it.
Yeah.
You know, you just wouldn't be able to... Too many people are too concerned and worried about things to be picking up strangers on the road in these days.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, there were dangers. I mean, goodness, anything could have gone wrong. Let me just go back to Christmas. I was in Lebanon when I travelled to Amman. I'd travelled down from Jerusalem to Amman, which wasn't crossing a boundary in those days, and it was a cold winter's night. And I tipped up at the bus station. There was a crowd of people, some of them there to meet somebody special, others just curious to see who was getting off the bus. And I had made no plans, I had no contacts, no arrangements made about where I was going to stay the night. And a chap attached himself to me, and he said, you must come with me, you must come with me. So I went with him, and I walked up the hill, and you spend the night with me? Okay, thank you very much. And it turned out he was a refugee, he was living in a shack. He gave me something to eat, and then he started to come on at me in a sexual advance, and I resisted, and he came on a bit stronger, and I resisted again. He said, you know like jig-a-jig? I said, no, I know like jig-a-jig. He said, useless English boy. So he let me sleep in peace, and in the morning he gave me some breakfast and sent me on my way. That could have ended very differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Goodness me.
But people did take risks.
So following that adventure then, Tim, you get back to the UK?
Yeah.
And what is the next step?
Teacher training college at Worcester.
And did you immediately take to that?
No.
Why not?
I was a crap teacher. I was good at hockey though.
Yeah. So did you start off and think, I'm not very good at this, but I'll get better? Or did it just never improve? Was it not your thing at all?
I was never a teacher. I don't know why I went into it, really.
So how long did that last?
Well, I did 3 years teacher training college, which was a scoosh, you know, and then I did a year teaching in Leeds, which, I mean, that taught me that I was never going to be a teacher.
And what were you teaching? A wide variety of things?
Geography. I was in Leeds. I was teaching in an all-boys secondary modern school, which was, you know, the label itself tells you where we were. It was downtown. It was the boys only who hadn't passed their 11 pluses, and I was out of my depth. I got out of that and I messed about for a bit. And then I did take another job with the United Nations Association in West Africa. That was an interesting experience.
Were you put forward for that job?
No, I was looking for something to do. I wanted to get abroad again, and I made myself available to the United Nations Association, and they sent me off to a teacher training college just south of Dakar in Senegal, the most westerly point of Africa. And I was there for a school year. It wasn't very successful. The director didn't want me there.
Why not?
He was, for his own reasons. I don't know. But again, I had a good year. I explored the region. I had a lot of interesting experiences. I got into, now looking back on it, it looks completely ridiculous. I knew some people from my college days in Worcester who were travelling overland in a Land Rover to China. And I had the opportunity, I thought, to meet up with them. So I sent a letter to them in England saying, I know you're leaving and I'm going to Istanbul and I'll be in the middle of the Galata Bridge at midday in this week, from Monday to Friday, and I'll meet you there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, well, and then I hoofed it across. I went to Morocco and hoofed it across North Africa, toe of Italy into Greece and across to Istanbul, and got there in time to meet the guys, and I'd left a forwarding address in Dakar to the British consulate in Istanbul, and I went to pick up some post the following morning, and there was a letter there which had been sent to me in Senegal and forwarded to Istanbul, and it said, don't go to Istanbul, the van's full. And I remember that morning very clearly. That's one morning in which I completely changed around all my plans. Before I had my lunch, I'd had numerous Turkish coffees, and I'd changed my plans. I was not going east. I was heading home, and I was going to belong in Northumberland. And that, from that point on, I almost threw away my passport. I didn't exactly, but I wanted to belong somewhere. And it was home, and it was Northumberland, which is, but having, now having made Northumberland my home, and then later I came here, I'm very happy. But, there were, 5 years in which I had some wonderful experiences knocking around the world.
Yeah, it's a fantastically exotic image, that meeting someone in the middle of a bridge in a different country far away. People in Edinburgh meeting at Fraser's at the West End, and you were meeting in the middle of that bridge. That's wonderful. It's a kind of lifestyle. I'd starting to wonder if you're perhaps a spy, Tim.
Well, people have wondered that, yeah.
It's not the kind of thing you'd confess on Thelma FM, I don't think. Or is it?
Well, I would. I'm an honest man. But I've told that story to some nieces and nephews recently, and they listened in wonderment. They couldn't imagine being so out of touch that you would make such a tenuous arrangement across so many miles in so many weeks. Yeah,
you'd be taking selfies of yourself on the bridge, and everyone would know you were on the bridge these days. Goodness me. Wonderful. Well, Tim, your life has been fantastic so far, and we've reached, I think, the 70s, and you are back in Northumberland. Can you take up the story from there?
Back in Northumberland and looking for a new career that wasn't teaching. Yes.
How did you escape that kind of spiral into a job that you didn't really enjoy?
Well, it's hard to imagine now, but jobs were there for the taking in those days. And I got a job as a trainee social worker with Northumberland County Council. And then I was 2 years in Wallsend, which was Northumberland at the time, just east of Newcastle, towards the coast. Very urban area. And I went to Newcastle Polytechnic at the time for a 2-year certificate in qualification of social work. I'm wonderfully educated, overeducated from a capacity perhaps. And then I moved to ANIC, social work department of the Northumberland County Council, till 1980. And then I wanted better things, or, other different things. And I took a job in Edinburgh, came here in 1980.
Was that an immediate love affair, Tim? Did you think, this is my place? Or
yes, I mean, everything. When we lived in the country near Alnwick, it was, I loved it. I loved being at home. It was just over the hill to Otterburn, to my parents' place. And I was married and had some children by then. And yes, I felt very comfortable, but everything was a car journey. I resented being so dependent on the car. I thought I might try city life. It was a choice between Edinburgh and Newcastle. No real contest. So it was Edinburgh, and I was lucky enough to get a job in Edinburgh. Yeah, I mean, I do remember that although I'd living just beside the border as I did, I often came to Scotland, to Jedburgh and Kelso, and we had school trips to Edinburgh, and my family, day trips from Audubon. We caught the train at St Boswell's when we were children, came to Waverley, and then later I'd had several holidays in Scotland, further north, the islands and Orkney and Grampians, and I wasn't a stranger in Scotland, I thought. But then when I came to live in 1980, I realised just what a huge wedge of culture and community life I had no real knowledge of it. Scotland was more than just a land of funny money and strange drinking hours on Sundays. There was a bit more to it than that. And I had to set about familiarising myself with my new cultural environment. And I really enjoyed, picking up Norman McCaig anthologies and other stuff.
We've fast-forwarded slightly there, Tim, past you getting married and having a few kids.
Yes. Well,
we could perhaps touch on that. When did you meet your wife?
In Newcastle, when I was doing my CQSW.
Is it a romantic story, Tim?
No, a fairly pedestrian story there, Barry. I'm not sure that that's got much interest to the listeners.
Okay. Okay.
Fairly sordid little business.
Right. Okay.
But there was love involved.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And the kids, when did the kids come along then? What year?
76 is the oldest, yes.
So how many children do you have?
Well, 5 now.
5, goodness me. They're worth a mention, Tim, I think.
Worth a mention. Hello, children.
So we're in Edinburgh. Are you immediately in Leith or are you somewhere else?
Well, we were in a position to buy something, and this was then, of course. Things are different now. We asked the council if we could rent a council flat or anything that had for a few months while we looked around and got a place to buy. And they said, yeah, if you just take what you're given, and that was fine. That was the deal. We got a place in Niddrie. It's demolished now. Walk-up road it was. And we looked around a few places in Edinburgh, and we happened on Leith. And it was wonderful. It was the best. But we're still in the same house we bought in 1980. Wonderful.
And where are you now?
In Madeira Place.
Right, okay. And you see yourself very much as a Leither now?
Well, one of the many recent immigrants.
Yeah. 40 years, Tim. I think you can call yourself a Leither. I was only in Leith for about a year and a half, and I feel like I've got a bit of Leither blood in there.
Oh, well. I could do this in Geordie if you want. No, I couldn't do it. I've been in Scotland all along now.
So the Leith adventure, you're in Leith with your family. Where does it go from there? What are you working as at that point?
Well, I got just the best job that ever there was. I worked with Garfield Training Centre, as it was then. It's a Steiner-based community of working with people with special needs.
Okay.
And it's based on the Steiner ideas, Rudolf Steiner, Camp Hill community. It's an urban extension of the Camp Hill communities, and it is in itself therapeutic and positive and creative. Yeah, so it was a wonderful place to work, and I met all sorts of people who some of them I still see.
And as much as the teaching wasn't for you, that job, as soon as you got it, you were the
social work. The social work. I was a professional social worker with a voluntary agency, so I had to have professional credibility with the social work department, the Lothian Region social work department, and so it was wonderful. I wasn't based in an area office as a local authority social worker might have been. I was in professors' houses in the Grange, and itinerant houses in Muirhouse in the same afternoon.
Yeah, so a crazy mix of culture.
Yeah.
And how long did you do that for then? The social
6 years.
Worker? 6 years. And of it, you obviously loved it. What took you to a different place?
Then my first wife left. That was a sadness, and I had to, I was a single parent for a few years, and then I was rescued by my second wife.
So you were looking after the 5 kids for a while, were you?
3 kids at that time.
Right, okay.
I needed help.
And how did you cope as a single dad? Not very well,
Well, I needed help, but I tell you, it was quite unfair. You see, single dads, I got far more credit and support than a single mother would have got in the same position. The dads get all the sympathy vote. Yeah. And
probably
I didn't deserve it. And there were women who, in a similar situation to me, who didn't get the sort of automatic moral support and sympathy that I was getting.
And they probably thought, as a kind of helpless man figure,
I know.
there was a need to mother you and look after you.
I know.
So your second wife came along and rescued you. What is her name? Is she allowed to mention?
Hello, Liz. She's getting a cup of coffee in Ocean Terminal now.
Ah, lovely. And what we'll do is we'll dedicate the next record to Liz.
That's nice.
So that you stay in the good books. So we go from the 6 years with what seems like your dream job. You leave that. Where do we go next from there?
Well, Liz was working in Glasgow. We nearly moved through to Glasgow in pursuit of her job, but actually I'm glad we didn't. We stayed on in Leith, and she was working, and I was the housekeeper and parent, a stay-at-home parent, and it worked reasonably well. And then, she was, she was very generous, and I was able to go to university and get a Bachelor of Divinity degree at Edinburgh University for 3 years. And I did think about going into the ministry of the Church of Scotland, but in a decision that the Church of Scotland can be very pleased and proud of, they rejected me. I'm so relieved. And so I've always been in the church, in and around, but I'm pleased they didn't let me take that step.
Right, let's have a quick look at the divinity degree and that part of your life after this record, Tim, which we will dedicate to Liz.
Hello, Liz.
This is a bit of Vera Lynn, Yours.
Till the stars.
We're here with Tim Bell on Life Stories. We've got to the point in Tim's life, we're almost up to date. Tim was running Trainspotting tours round Leith. And you were telling us, how did you actually get into that, Tim? You just saw a gap in the market.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't bear to be a kilted wonder tour guide on the high street. I wanted something alternative. Trainspotting was there. I was bringing up a young family in the 1980s when the heroin scene was raging all around me. I wasn't particularly aware of it, and HIV collided with intravenous injecting, shooting up. And the story's all there in Trainspotting, and it's a story to be opened up and told. And
where did you make the leap then? From you've been doing the tours and then the book, was that just a natural progression, Tim?
It was, and it's been 15 years in the making, on and off.
And so when was it published, Tim?
Last August, by Leith Press.
They're quite a local imprint. They're an Edinburgh publishing company?
Yes, they do Scottish and Scotland stuff. They're a small publishing house, and I've got a lot of time, a lot of respect for them, because they have a good judgment. For example, they took Darren McGarvey's Poverty Safari. Darren McGarvey, also known as Lockie.
Yep.
And they saw the merit in it, and it was given the George Orwell Prize, and Picador bought out Leith. So good for Leith. They took the initial risk, and it worked out well for them.
And how did you approach them, Tim? Did you send them part of the book or the idea, or how did it work?
I played hockey 30 years ago with the director.
Now, you need an in somewhere, Tim, don't you, really? And I think he's not going to publish one of your books just because he's your pal, but it gives you the in so that you can get over the idea. You can they'll look at a bit of your writing, you can get the idea over.
Well, he supported me later as the project developed. He gave me a wee bit of his staff time to help me through it, and so he always had an interest in it. So
tell us a bit more about the book, Tim.
Well, it's a critical analysis of Evan Welsh's book Trainspotting. It is more cleverly constructed than the chaos suggests. There is chaos, but there are also some clever tensions and structures in the book in a literary way. I feel quite at home in analysing it in a literary way. It's also a critical analysis of Harry Gibson's play, Trainspotting, and Danny Boyle's film, Trainspotting. But it's also the story behind the story, how heroin came to Leith and Muirhouse in the 1980s. 70s really, and how people took up the injecting habit, how it contains a potted history of HIV, and it puts the Trainspotting phenomenon of the mid to late 1990s into its geographical, locational context and into its cultural context. I think it's a one-stop shop for all things Trainspotting.
Excellent. And they say that people have one book in them, Tim. Is that the case for you, or are there further projects? Is that you done?
There are no further projects.
No. So people need to buy this book in particular,
yes.
And not wait for any more Tim books. This is their only chance.
That's right.
Well, I've read a bit of it myself and really enjoyed it, so very best of luck with that. That's Choose Life, Choose Leith. It's by Tim Bell. The subtitle is Trainspotting on Location, and it's a great read. Where can people get it from, Tim?
All good bookshops.
All good bookshops. We're going to finish. Tim, thank you very much for appearing on Life Stories.
Thank you very much, Barry.
If you have a story to share, please pop in to see us at the Wee Museum of Memory on the second floor of Ocean Terminal in Leith. You can also visit our Facebook page to keep up with our regular events and view our wonderful photo videos and much more on our YouTube channel just by searching for the Living Memory Association. We also have a brilliant website at www.livingmemory.org.uk hosting over 3,000 photos in conjunction with Edinburgh Collected. Until next time, we bid you farewell.